A lot of the times we're in a hurry. We know where the story is going and we want to get from point A to point B. We want to move the plot forward. But keep in mind that in certain writing situations you could be missing out on a really wonderful opportunity to show the incremental development of something in the story. It's human nature to get enjoyment from each stage of development. If you know the story Silverstein's The Giving Tree, that story development is a really great part of that story. So you kind of, from the beginning of the story, you have a good idea about how it's going to go. There's going to be the boy that will go to the tree, and the tree will give part of itself to better his life, and become less and less as it goes along. And so it isn't so much a suspense story as it is the viewer. What the viewer is getting from it is getting to see each stage of what happens. And every time that the next stage is seen, that gives the viewer pleasure, that gives the viewer enjoyment. And it doesn't matter what kind of development it is. It could be a development towards getting better, or it could be a development towards getting worse. So what kind of development is satisfying to the reader? Usually it's development where there is a significant change. If it's just a matter of like, first they were gambling and won $10, then they were gambling and won another $10, then they were gambling and won another $10, then they were gambling and won another $10, that is not satisfying because it does not constitute a real change. But if your character is in a state where he or she is completely broke, and then they're in a state where they have a quarter, but they can't find anything to do with it. It's not enough to do anything. And then they're at a state where they have a consistent paycheck where they're able to move into a place. And then they're in a stage where all of a sudden they have millions of dollars that they don't know what to do with. These constitute significant changes where, in a sense, the character is not really the same character they were in the previous stage. And what the reader is getting from clear, well-defined development in your story is a satisfaction that ranks up there with the other satisfactions that you can give your reader in good fiction. And it ranks right up there with the satisfaction you can give your viewer from the climax at the end of the story. So it's really good to take the time to slow down and instead of rushing it from point A to point B, think about how you have a chance to really entertain your viewer by taking them through the stages. And it is not a drudgery. It is not a thing of drudgery to have to take them through each stage. Realize that you have a great storytelling opportunity if you can be creative about thinking exactly. It can be a story in itself, thinking about each stage of development that happens, and it can have its own kind of poetry. And if you realize that each point of development that you present to the viewer, it can have its own unique qualities to it that no other writer has decided to have developments take place quite this way. Let's say that you're working on a story where your protagonist needs to build a ship to get off an island. And working on this story, what you want to do is just get your character off that island. And it's still worth it to slow down enough to take your reader through the stages of getting that ship built, because you do have the advantage of them anticipating your protagonist getting off the island, and in the meantime you can satisfying them by presenting them with these stages of development, and your reader will be right there with the protagonist wanting to get this ship built and getting a lot of satisfaction from each minor achievement being made to the final achievement of the ship being ready to sail. And if you take the time to hit upon each major stage of the development of a story, the story is going to seem more real to the viewer. If you have the time, please go check out my website, solomation.com, where you can watch animation and even get one of the books of the story I'm working on, Terrible Immunity, and it'll be a project I'll be working on for years. Please take the time to go check it out. Also, if this was a helpful tutorial, hit the like button. If you have any comments that you think other viewers would be interested in reading, please leave a comment and subscribe. Writing exercise you could do is come up with a one-page story that is nothing but a story of development, where you're not trying to create an exciting action adventure drama, which are all really great ways of writing entertaining fiction, but try to make this one-page story as interesting as possible, simply for the stages of development, and make each stage clear and each stage interesting and creative. And it doesn't have to be about the tank getting blown up or the protagonist getting millions of dollars. It could happen on a real small scale. It could be about a bug trying to make it across the sidewalk. When you're in a part of your story where something is going through stages of development, that can almost be a story in itself, a story within your story. A good example of this is in superhero fiction, where you have how that individual became a superhero. So it's kind of its own story within the story of what stages of development they went through to take them from a non-superhero to a superhero. This type of storytelling is so effective that a lot of the times it doesn't need the other ways of telling stories. It doesn't necessarily have to have the antagonist and the protagonist duking it out. It doesn't necessarily have to build to a climax. It doesn't necessarily have to have something at stake or something that needs to be achieved. I think that people are interested in learning about science and in learning about history, because a lot of these stories, science and history, are stories of development, where going through the stages of development, either a historical development or the stages it takes for a discovery, you get the great satisfaction of seeing something start here and be this thing and go through these various transformations into something still the same thing but very, very different. If you're at a point of a story where you need to develop something to get from point A to point B, this is a really wonderful time not to be in a hurry, and go ahead and take the time to work on each stage of development. For this reason, suspense is about holding off an event that your reader is anticipating and wants to happen. So if you're impatient to get to point B, that's a good sign that you have a good element of suspense. You have something that the reader is going to be anticipating, and that will generate suspense. They're going to look forward to that happening. So by taking your reader through these stages of development, they get the satisfaction of each stage of development, and they have this built-up feeling of suspense, because they, in a good way, they're impatient to finally get to the final point, the point B, the final stage of development. So this is an opportunity for you to build suspense. And in the meantime, you're still satisfying your reader because they are still satisfied by each stage of development. Realize that you have something great working for you. You have an element of suspense. Your reader is going to really want the character to get off the island, and in the meantime satisfied about this mini adventure of how he or she fashions the boat, gets it to work, maybe it sinks, and then it needs to be, redone somehow. I hope that this was helpful. If there's a link to all my writing tutorials at my website, solimation.com. Again, please hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. I hope your writing goes well, and have a good day.